Welcome to the Crawcast. I am your host, George Crawsack, and these are my predictions for Week 1 of the NFL season. And if you like this type of content, make sure to hit that subscribe button like it owes you money. And if you want my more immediate thoughts on things, make sure to follow me on Twitter at Crawcast. So it's kind of interesting. So how I'm going to set this up is every single week I will do my quarterback rankings, I'll do my I will do my weekly predictions, and I will do my weekly results and reactions. And then I also might be able to live stream some games, give immediate results and reactions to you guys. So this is an exciting NFL season. It's going to be tough for Week 1 because some of these guys haven't played since January, and everyone's kind of on an equal basis. I understand some teams are better and worse than others, but Week 1 tends to be the hardest week to predict because sometimes you have bad teams that play good, and sometimes you have good teams that play bad. And so you never really know. So this video is mostly just like hot takes and who I think will win in these certain games. And like I said, it's just tough for Week 1 predictions. And once the season starts fanning out a little bit better, I'll be able to more accurately predict these. And I also just want to say, every single week I will have my upset of the week because I think it's just boring if everyone's just picking who is projected to win every single week. So I'll have at least one, maybe two major upsets of the week, and I'll get to those when we talk about them. So now let's get started. So the first game is the Dallas Cowboys at the Philadelphia Eagles, and I think the Eagles are going to win. So both these teams have had some major overhauls, especially the Cowboys. So what's interesting about them is, yes, they lost Micah Parsons. That's the big news. But I don't think, yes, obviously losing Micah Parsons makes the Cowboys a worse team. But I don't think it fundamentally changes them from a great team to a bad team. I think this game is going to be much closer than a lot of people expect. I don't see it as going to be a blowout. I do think the Eagles are going to win, but I just don't see them blowing out the Cowboys because the Cowboys' run defense with Kenny Clark did get significantly better to help stop Saquon Barkley. But in the grand scheme of things, losing Micah Parsons is a huge loss. And I think they're still going to have a high-powered offense. Unfortunately, they do not have a run game. But Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens is a heck of a receiving duo and quarterback combination. But it's just that lack of the run game and basically the Eagles defense knowing they're going to pass every single time, can that overcome that? And the Eagles they did lose a couple of players in the secondary of C.J. Gardner-Johnson, and they lost Darius Slay, but overall they're still great defense, amazing defensive line. Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley are still rolling at a high level, great receivers in A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. So overall, the Eagles, I think, are a much better team. But like I said, I don't know. I think the Cowboys turned themselves into an almost guaranteed playoff team with Micah Parsons to a borderline playoff team without him. Again, I don't think it's one of those where they're going to go from good to absolutely terrible, but they're just going to be an average team. And I do think this will be a close game, but I do have the Eagles winning. The next game is the Kansas City Chiefs against the Los Angeles Chargers. Technically, the Chargers are the home team, but it's in Brazil. I think the Chiefs are going to win. So this is an interesting matchup. So you do have the Chargers under Jim Caldwell. Justin Herbert still playing great. And then it is interesting with the receiving corps. You do have Vlad McConkey, but Quentin Johnson has struggled quite a bit. Chargers defense, I think, is still solid, although it feels like they're missing a lot of cornerbacks. And then with the Chiefs, Rashid Rice is going. It looks like he's going to be suspended and probably won't play because I heard talks about a 6-game suspension. This is being recorded kind of right after the Micah Parsons trade, so I don't know if it's official that he's going to suspend, but he probably will miss the season. But their defense still fantastic, still looks really, really good, and it just, I hate to say it, but the Chiefs just have the Chargers number. Patrick Mahomes has Herbert's number, and the Chiefs are just overall a much better team than the Chargers, and I think they're going to win, even with a bit of a lack of receiving corps. They're just a much more better team. The next game is the Miami Dolphins at the Indianapolis Colts, and I think the Colts are going to win. So both these teams are coming off of a very down year, but it is interesting with the Colts because If you look at it, last year they basically didn't have a quarterback within Anthony Richardson playing horrible, and then Joe Flacco, he had one decent game, and then he started playing horrible. So they didn't really have a quarterback. Their defense was fairly solid, and then now you have Jonathan Taylor, and basically all that needs to happen is Daniel Jones just needs to not blow it, plain and simple. And if he can just not make as many mistakes as Anthony Richardson, have a solid short passing game, then I think the Colts can be successful without like really relying on him too much. Like they don't need him to do anything spectacular. They just need him to do the easy stuff and not make any key mistakes. And I think Daniel Jones can do that. Although it's a little bit surprising because uh, I don't see the Colts as like a Super Bowl or playoff team, so they are playing for the future. And I think Anthony Richardson does give you more of a future than Daniel Jones. So I personally would have started Anthony Richardson because here's the thing, even if he sucks, well, then you have a top pick to get a quarterback in the draft. Whereas Daniel Jones, I think you're kind of in a scary situation where what if he plays decent enough to get you to the playoffs, but not good enough to make it to the Super Bowl? Then you're stuck in the position the Giants were in. Do you give Daniel Jones a huge contract despite having a history of not really playing that well? And then the Dolphins, like, I think they can still be good if they remain healthy. And I think a lot of that relies on Tua. So Devon Achane was injured and is still kind of currently injured, even though he'll probably play. And then Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle really didn't play that well last year, but most of that blame belongs on the quarterback, and that's kind of where I lost a lot of respect for Mike McDaniel because that's how you, to me, show you're a great coach that you can evolve and change your offense depending on who your quarterback is. Like for example, Matt LaFleur, when Jordan Love got hurt, he completely revamped the offense to make Malik Willis look good and run the offense to and try to excel where Malik Willis excels and try to draw back where Malik Willis's weaknesses are. Whereas with Mike McDaniel, he was basically like, I don't care who the quarterback is. We're going to try to make like Tim Boyle and Tyler Huntley and players like that. We're going to try to force them into the Tua role and play exactly like Tua. And it just fundamentally did not work. And so I think there's certain guys like that where it's like great offensive coordinator, but just not really like a head coach material. And there's nothing wrong with that. Not everyone can be a head coach. And I think that's the reason why, like Ben Johnson, for example, why he kept putting off being a head coach is because he might not see himself as head coach material, just an amazing offensive coordinator. But overall, I think the Colts are going to win. And it's going to be a bit of a surprising one because, again, defense is good, offensive line is decent, receivers are decent. All Daniel Jones needs to do is just not blow it, and they can win this game. The next game is the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the New York Jets, and I think the Steelers are going to win. So the big story of this game is Aaron Rodgers' first game with the Steelers. And I do think he gets a little bit too much hate, because even though the Jets were not good last year, Aaron Rodgers still played fairly decent. It felt like the whole Jets system last year was out of sync, where it's like, when the offense plays well, the defense played horrible. When the defense played well, the offense played horrible. And then when the offense and defense both played horrible, it's like the special teams and you're missing a bunch of kicks. And so Aaron Rodgers did not play that bad last year. It's just that overall as a team, they were terrible. And so now that he has a competent head coach, great defense, and then you also have the DK Metcalf factor. Offensive line, I think, is a bit shaky, but overall should be very solid. And then the Jets. I'm not a huge believer in Justin Fields. He just hasn't shown anything in the NFL yet. Like, it doesn't mean he can't be a good NFL quarterback, because he has shown, like, flashes, but he has not shown that he can be consistently good enough to be a starting NFL quarterback. And so this will definitely be a good shot for him to prove himself. And then same with Aaron Glenn, where Aaron Glenn, I think, is an amazing locker room coach. I think he brings a great energy, kind of like Dan Campbell, where he brings a great energy, great motivator, great leader. I don't think he's that great of a head coach. The Lions defense was consistently letting the team down when their offense was playing amazing, and that consistently brought the team down. And so I don't think the Jets defense is going to fare much better, but again, a lot of times a motivator can be great. It just depends on who are the coordinators around him, and we don't know that just yet. But overall, I just don't think the Jets are going to do anything significant this year. And I think the Steelers are definitely a playoff team, and we'll see if they could be Super Bowl bound. We don't really know. And I'm just going to say the Steelers are going to win. The next game is the Carolina Panthers versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I think the Jaguars are going to win. So this is the battle of two kind of former number one overall picks who have not had the greatest NFL careers so far. So this is going to be kind of interesting. Bryce Young versus Trevor Lawrence. Bryce Young, towards the end of last year, started looking really, really good. But now if you look at this year, Adam Thielen, his top receiver, done. He's gone because he traded to Minnesota. Jalen Cocker, he's on IR, so he's gone. So now he's working with Hunter Renfrow and Xavier Legette. And Xavier Legette is definitely an interesting character, but he has not shown to be a good receiver yet. And then I think the Panthers defense is fairly solid, but overall I just don't think it's a very good team. And then the Jaguars, new head coach, great offensive mind. Maybe he can help get Trevor Lawrence's career back on track. He certainly helped Baker Mayfield get his career on track, and I think they're kind of similar players. And the big interesting one is Travis Hunter. And this is kind of my big hot take is I don't think Travis Hunter can play both sides. I just don't think it can be done. Because you're telling me that he's going to play wide receiver, run full speed, try to beat cornerbacks like Jalen Ramsey and Jair Alexander and Patrick Surtain, and then without any breaks, then run full speed and try to cover receivers like Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. It just can't be done. I say by week 3 or 4, he's completely done. If they even give him the shot at all, he's not going to play both sides. I think week 1, they'll give him a few plays on both sides just for, kind of feels like a little bit like the meme of it because they drafted him so high overall. But I think by week 4, he's going to be either just a receiver or just a corner, and it'll probably be just a receiver if I had to take a guess. But I think he was kind of drafted too high because it kind of feels like pretty decent at both, but not a master of either one. And you kind of need a master of one or the other to be the second overall pick in the draft. And again, it's too much on the body to try to do that both sides. And then if you think about it, without breaks in between, then that also doubles the chances of his injury if he's doubling the plays he's on the field. So higher risk of injury. And then also kind of things, well, let's just say, okay, he's going to play half the snaps on offense and half the snaps on defense. Instead of, almost a full-time offense or full-time defense, just give him half snaps on offense, half snaps on defense. And so he'll have some rest time. But then your second overall pick is not on the field for half the game because he's sitting on the bench, kind of resting. So again, that just really didn't make sense to me that he was drafted so high. We'll see. Maybe I'll be proved wrong, but that's my hot take is that I think he'll have a decent rookie year at receiver, but I just don't think it's possible for him to play both sides. But overall, I think the Jaguars are a better team. Their offense is better. They're definitely getting less injured, and I think the Jaguars are going to win. The next game is the Arizona Cardinals versus the New Orleans Saints, and I think the Cardinals are going to win. So this is the Arizona Cardinals versus the New Orleans Saints. This is kind of pretty simple. I think the Saints are going to be the worst team in football. They definitely have the worst roster. They don't have a quarterback. Spencer Rattler has shown nothing but being terrible. Tyler Shuck, we don't know if he's any good or not because he's a rookie. And the Cardinals, the great defense. Hopefully their offense can improve now that Kyler Murray's healthy. And this is kind of a pretty easy one, unless the Saints want to stick to tradition. And I don't know if you remember this, but it was it might have been, I think it was last year, where it was the first 2 games of the year, they scored 40 points and shocked everyone and then came back down to earth. But maybe the Saints have a complete shocker and score 40 points, but I just don't see that is likely at all happening, and I just think the Saints are just not a good team. I don't think they're going to be good this year, and so I have the Cardinals winning. The next game is my upset of the week, the New York Giants versus the Washington Commanders, and I think the Giants are going to win. So this is my upset of the week, and this is probably my biggest hot take, is that I don't think the Commanders are going to be that good this year. If you look at last year, they basically broke all traditional wisdom and traditional game flow, where they had a bunch of old guys play really well. Like Zach Ertz, he played well. Bobby Wagner, he played well. And then they just signed Von Miller. And typically, these old guys at the end of their career are kind of more washed and don't really play that well. And that kind of broke tradition where, okay, a bunch of old guys at the end of their careers have them play and play well. And then another one, Jaden Daniels, great rookie year. Is he going to take like a sophomore slump? Kind of like CJ Stroud, great rookie year, and then he took a big slump last year. So I think it's like kind of shocking how they broke all traditional like wisdom and kind of projections and played really well. Even with the Cliff Kingsbury offense, having the offense play well and not collapse in the middle of the season. So I think everyone comes back down to earth. We kind of follow the rules of the NFL, and the Commanders are not going to be that good this year. Of course, I could be proven wrong, but that is my one of my biggest hot takes. And then look at the Giants. Kind of like a little bit what I said of the Colts, but times it by 10. The Giants did not have a quarterback last year. They had Daniel Jones and Tommy DeVito, and I think Tim Boyle even played a game for them. So they were in most of those games despite not having a quarterback, despite not really even having an offense. And that is because of their defense. The Giants have a really good defense, and now Russell Wilson is capable of throwing that deep ball to Malik Nabers. Like, Malik Nabers is going to have the most insane stat line of this year, because he'll either have 0 catches for 0 yards in a game, or he's going to have like 4 catches, 180 yards, and 3 touchdowns. It's going to be nowhere in between. He's either going to have the worst game imaginable or the best game imaginable, because that's how Russell Wilson is. He only knows how to throw a deep ball, and I do think it'll work now that he has a pretty decent defense. I think I'd honestly compare him a lot like to the Steelers last year of Russell Wilson, where I do think they're capable of making the playoffs with a strong defense and a decent enough offense, but I don't think it's enough to get them over the hump with a Super Bowl win. So I think the Giants are going to win, and it's going to be a major upset. The next game is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the Atlanta Falcons, and I think the Buccaneers are going to win. So this one I feel like is a little bit easier for me because just look at the two teams. Like, Baker Mayfield is starting to hit his stride and play really well. Their defense is definitely getting better. The Buccaneers have a good offense, although Chris Godwin is injured. And then I think the Buccaneers are just overall a very solid team. And then the Falcons, they haven't shown anything. Michael Penix Jr. played 3 games and he hasn't shown anything special at all. Yes, Bijan is good. They completely revamped the pass rush with 2 rookies, which I'm not sure how much they're going to help or hurt. Yes, they're rookies, but also we have seen some valuable rookies. And so overall, just the Falcons don't have a winning roster to me. Again, Michael Penix Jr., we have seen basically nothing out of him, but it was his rookie year, so I feel like you have to put big like asterisk next to it because typically rookie years don't count in the sense where I feel like you need 3 years as a starter to really see what type of quarterback you are, and you can't just base it off of 3 games. But in those 3 games, in the same breath, he did not play well, so he still feels like a question mark / when we've seen him, it's not very good. But I do think the Falcons have a decent enough team to like not be one of the worst records in the NFL. I just don't see them beating the Buccaneers because I think the Buccaneers are fairly decent and are going to have a decent record. This is my second upset of the week. I have the Cincinnati Bengals versus the Cleveland Browns, and I think the Browns are going to win. So in this game, I think the Browns are going to win because, again, I feel like I'm repeating myself a lot, but the Browns didn't have a quarterback last year. They had Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who played horrible, and then I can't even remember who replaced him. It's escaping me right now, but that's how bad they were because they had it was Bailey Zappi. That's who replaced Dorian Thompson-Robinson. So they had a decent record. Well, not really a decent record, but they won 3 games. But they were in a lot of those games despite not having an offense. So now that you add Joe Flacco to the mix, which I don't know if Joe Flacco is going to finish the season as a starter, but I definitely think he wants to prove himself as much as possible that he can still hang in this league. Jerry Jeudy. Oh, Jameis Winston was also a part of the team, but he's so volatile that it's even hard to count him as playing well because he's going to throw 4 touchdowns to the offense and 3 to the defense. Anyways, that's beside the point. But so the Browns have a decent receiving core, decent offensive line, and then their defense. Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, they're a decent group. Like I believe in the Browns because I'm not saying they're going to I think they're a borderline playoff team. I think they probably won't make the playoffs, but it's just the Browns are a decent team. And then look at the Bengals. Number one, it feels like it's tradition for them to lose week one to an embarrassing team. That feels like it happens every year. And then Joe Burrow, the offensive line is probably going to struggle quite a bit. And then their defense, they basically have Trey Hendrickson and nobody else, and that's kind of worrying. So if Joe Flacco just plays above average, I think this will be at least a really close game, and I'm picking the Browns to win. And it's kind of interesting that the Browns are starting Joe Flacco because that is telling me, okay, they're trying to win as many games as possible. Because if it was up to me, I probably would have cut Joe Flacco and kept Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, and Shedeur Sanders because let's be honest, you don't have a future of Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco's going to be out of the NFL within the next year or two. Whereas, like, Kenny Pickett, former first-round pick, Dylan Gabriel, third-round pick, and then Shedeur Sanders, rookie fifth-round pick. At least all those guys have potential to be your franchise quarterback, whereas Joe Flacco really doesn't. And then also it's a tough division with the Bengals, Ravens, and Steelers. But overall, I think the Browns are going to win. That is my prediction. The next game is the Las Vegas Raiders versus the New England Patriots, and I think the Patriots are going to win. So I'm picking the Patriots to win. So it was interesting because both these teams had a major revamp. The Patriots spent a lot of money in free agency and then got Mike Vrabel as their head coach, and then the Raiders are basically becoming the new Seahawks of Geno Smith, Pete Carroll, Tyler Lockett. So I do think the Raiders are a better team with Ashton Gentry, and they have a decent defense. I think the Raiders are the better team, but Drake May ended the season very strong, and so who knows if he can take another bump or if he'll kind of just be terrible because he wasn't very good, but I think he was on the worst roster in the NFL. And so how much do you balance that where it's like, is the roster bringing him down, or is he just kind of contributing to everything? And so Mike Vrabel is trying to revamp the offense and really just revamp the team. Again, spent a lot of money in the free agency, completely redid the defense, and I think the Patriots just have a lot to prove. So I think the Patriots are going to win. And then the Raiders, I think they'll have a decent season. I think they'll have a decent offense. Their defense is a little bit shaky, although Max Crosby is pretty good. And overall, I think this is a very even matchup. I'm just picking the Patriots just because I think Mike Vrabel has a little bit more to prove, especially since he was fired from Tennessee. The next game is the San Francisco 49ers versus the Seattle Seahawks, and I think the 49ers are going to win. So the 49ers versus the Seahawks, I think the 49ers are the better team. It's just interesting because the Seahawks feel like a wild card where Sam Darnold, we don't know how he's going to play. The offensive line is not very good, and we saw last year of the Vikings, when the offensive line struggles, Sam Darnold struggles a lot. And then you did get Cooper Kupp, which is really good. Jackson Smith and Jigba is really good. And then the defense, I think, is solid. It's pretty solid. Not spectacular, but solid. And so I think the Seahawks are like an average team. And then the 49ers, they've always been great. Brock Purdy's coming back. McCaffrey's back. You do have the receiver is a big question mark because Jauan Jennings will probably play. Ricky Pearsall's going to play. You have Kittle back. Amazing offensive line. And just the 49ers have just been dealing with a lot of injuries, and that's unfortunate. But they are still a great team under Kyle Shanahan. Again, receiver is a big question mark because Ayuk, the big money receiver, he's not going to play because he's injured. And then overall, I think the 49ers are just the better team. Kind of plain and simple. And the Seahawks are just too much of a question mark to really pick them. The next game is the Tennessee Titans versus the Denver Broncos, and I think the Broncos are going to win. So this one I think is a pretty easy one. I'm picking the Broncos to win because with the Titans, Cam Ward, rookie quarterback, you don't know what you have in him yet. And I do feel bad for him because everyone's talking about all the other rookies, and I get it. Jackson Dart, really good preseason. Shedeur Sanders, even though he had one good game and one bad game, he has like a whole like cult following. So a lot of people are talking about him. Whereas Ward, he had a pretty decent preseason. Cam, like he wasn't spectacular, but he was decent, and just overall rookie quarterbacks tend to struggle. And the Broncos, they have a really great defense, and then we'll see if Bo Nix can take another leap. And their offense should be fairly decent, and I just think this is going to be more or less a simple one. I'm not necessarily saying Cam Ward's a bad quarterback. I just think the roster around him is not very great. And again, rookie quarterbacks tend to struggle. That's not always the case because we've seen exceptions of like Jaden Daniels, but overall, rookie quarterbacks tend to struggle. And so I'm going to say he's not going to break the trend and, going to be any different. So I think he'll struggle this first game. And then, like I said, the Broncos, great defense. The next game is the Detroit Lions versus the Green Bay Packers, and I think the Lions are going to win. Now, this one is a really tough one because I kind of kept going back and forth. When the schedules were released, I made a video predicting the Packers season, and I picked them to lose to Detroit. And then the Micah Parsons trade happened, and I thought, how much will Micah Parsons affect this game? And the truth is, I'm not sure that much because he is still dealing with a back issue. He did just join the team on Monday, and so how much is he going to play? The Packers tend to be overly cautious when it comes to players, and also you don't want to risk re-injury. Like if you had the choice, make sure Micah Parsons is healthy for further weeks and lose week 1, or have a high injury risk of Micah Parsons and win week 1. I think you choose the loss because Micah Parsons is going to be so valuable to the team in the future. So that one's a bit of a tough one, and I do think this will be a really close game. But Micah Parsons, if he does play, I think he's only going to play like 10 to 20 snaps. And if you are at that point where he's playing so few snaps, I say just shut him down and bench him, just to make sure he gets back and is healthy. That's kind of what I would say. But the thing that also concerns me is the run game, because Kenny Clark is a good run defender, and I know like a lot of people were hating on Micah Parsons, like, oh, he's not great in run defense. And that's correct. He is not great in run defense, but his amazing pass rush ability makes up for the fact that he's not that great in run defense. Whereas missing Kenny Clark, and then you have the Lions, who are an amazing run team. The O-line, though, did suffer, so that's something you have to be concerned about for the Lions. But Dave Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs are still really, really solid. The Lions' defense, they get Hutchinson back, but we don't know if Hutchinson is going to be kind of the same player he was before or not, because it was amazing. Yes, he was going against a lot of backup offensive tackles, but in the first 4.5 games, he had 8 sacks. The record is 22, and so he was on pace to have basically the greatest season ever for a defensive end before he got injured, and basically his entire leg exploded. So is he going to be the same player coming back? I don't know. Look, we don't know if he's going to be the same player or not, because that is a pretty big and significant injury. So like I said, I didn't really like Aaron Glenn as their defensive coordinator, and Kelvin Shepard is just their linebackers coach promoted to defensive coordinator, so I don't think their defense will be particularly great, but the Lions are certainly getting healthier. And then Goff, this is another version of an offense, and we don't know how he's going to be, because we saw under like Jeff Fisher's offense, he struggled, and then he got McVay, and he was doing really good, and then under Anthony Lynn, Goff struggled under his offense, and then under Ben Johnson, he played really well. So I don't know how the offense is going to look with him, if he's going to, struggle, or if he's going to look really good, because it feels like he needs the offense a little bit tailor-made to him, and there's nothing wrong with that, because he is very good at reading a defense and making the throws that are necessary. Will the new offensive coordinator be able to implement that into a good enough scheme? I don't know, so it's kind of a wait and see. But overall, I am picking the Lions to win because I don't know how much Micah Parsons is going to play. They did lose Kenny Clark, and the Packers corners, I think that's going to be a struggle. Edgerrin Cooper looks really phenomenal, and he looked great in his limited playing time. Yes, it was limited playing time, so we don't really know how, well he will play. Xavier McKinney's still great, and I think this is a very, very even matchup. And their second game on Thanksgiving, I think that's going to be really exciting. In my pre the season predictions, I did pick the Packers to win in Thanksgiving. But once these two teams, kind of get more into a rhythm, and Micah Parsons comes back as healthy, that'll be a really exciting game. But overall, I feel like I have to pick the Lions here. The next game is the Houston Texans versus the Los Angeles Rams, and I think the Rams are going to win. So the Texans at the Rams, I think the Rams are going to win. I think their offense is much improved. It is a little bit depends on the health of Matthew Stafford. I believe he is starting, and like for example, if Jimmy Garoppolo is starting, I'm picking the Texans. But I believe Matthew Stafford is going to be the one starting for the Rams, and I think they're improved their offense. Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua are both wide receiver ones, and they're both phenomenal. Like Devontae Adams, again, he was on the Jets with a losing record, but he played insanely well last year. The Rams defense, when it mattered in the playoffs, it stepped up really well. And then the Texans, their offense started to struggle quite a bit. CJ Stroud did not play that well. He did not take like a sophomore jump. Again, that doesn't mean he in his third year he won't take that jump, but going from his first to second year, he did not play that well. They are losing Joe Mixon, and I don't think their offensive line is that great, and it only got worse. But the Texans defense is phenomenal. That's what carried the team to the playoffs last year. And maybe that Texans defense can shut down the Rams offense, but overall in the combination of offense and defense, I think the Rams are the better team here. The next game is the Baltimore Ravens at the Buffalo Bills, and I think the Bills are going to win. So this is the big battle of two powerhouses, Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen. And I do have to say, I think the Ravens are actually the better team here. I think they have a very good defense. I think their offense is very solid. It's just that I think the Bills are going to win because, again, Josh Allen has been so incredible, and it really feels like Josh Allen has had Lamar's number in almost every game they played against each other. And I just can't explain it. And then the Ravens also feel like they always lose in week one. And so that's kind of the factors I'm going off of because the Ravens, I don't like their receiving weapons, but they have Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, which are both really great. And then the Bills defense, I'm very concerned about them. I don't think they are the greatest defense, but again, this is one of those where it's like I can't explain it, where you just have a gut feeling where it's like these two pretty evenly matched teams because of their offensive firepower, and both the top two quarterbacks in the NFL. And I just have the gut feeling that the Bills are going to win over the Ravens. And, no real other explanation other than that. And the final game is the Minnesota Vikings at the Chicago Bears. And I think the Bears are going to win. So this is a tough one because these are both pretty revamped teams. You got Ben Johnson coming in with a new offense, great offensive line. Caleb Williams played pretty well last year. Like, how do I say? I feel like you have to have different standards for a rookie, whereas, like, again, Caleb Williams played really well for a rookie, but overall did not have the greatest season if you want to put it on, like, terms of your average quarterback where your rankings. And so they revamped their offensive line. Their defense, I think, is about the same. Maybe got slightly worse because I think Matt Eberflus was still a decent defensive coordinator, even though he was a bad head coach. And that was kind of talking about a little bit of Mike McDaniel, where sometimes these guys just aren't head coach material. And I think Eberflus is a good coordinator but bad head coach. And so this is Ben Johnson's time to shine. And can Caleb Williams run this offense? So that's very interesting. And then with the Vikings, it's also interesting because J.J. McCarthy is such a question mark. The Vikings still will have a great defense. I think their offense is still good. Amazing offensive line, good running backs, good receivers, even though Jordan Addison is suspended. J.J. McCarthy is such a question mark. I think the Vikings will still have a decent season, even as long as J.J. McCarthy isn't a total bust and plays absolutely horrible. I think the Vikings should have a decent season, but I'm just picking the Bears because it feels like the offensive weapons, their receivers are great. Caleb Williams will probably take a step up with Ben Johnson, and it kind of just feels like the Bears have everything to lose here, where it's like the Vikings, where it's like, okay, we're still trying to get J.J. McCarthy acclimated to the NFL, whereas the Bears, who have finally the ones that convinced Ben Johnson to leave the Lions and become a head coach, they just have everything to prove, and I think the Bears are going to do it, and they are going to win. So those are my predictions for week one of the NFL season. Again, like I said, it's tough because none of these teams have played. We don't know who's going to be good, who's not going to be good. Injuries always are a factor, and So it's tough to predict stuff like this. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Who do you think will win? Who do you think will lose? And if you like this type of content, make sure to hit that subscribe button like it owes you money. And if you want to know my more immediate thoughts on things like football and wrestling related, make sure to follow me on Twitter at Crawcast, and I'll see you on the next one.